stages of NA extraction from the material containing or suspected of containing hepatitis B, C, D, E or HIV must be conducted in Class 2 or Class 3 Biological Safety Cabinet of Biological Protection. When stored in a lysis buffer, precipitation of crystals is allowed. Before you start, check the lysis solution for the absence of a precipitate. In case of presence of crystals, the lysis solution must be heated at 65 degrees Celsius until they are completely dissolved. Next, you need to mix gently lysis solution by inverting the vial 5-10 times, avoiding foaming. Mark the required number of 1.5 ml tubes by following scheme. 3 tubes for standard 1, 3 tubes for standard 2, 1 tube for negative control, 2 tubes for each sample to be tested. For example, if you need to test 5 samples, mark 17 tubes, 10 for the samples, 1 for negative control, 3 for standard 1, 3 for standard 2. Add 10 microliters of pre-mixed RNA-IC in each tube, except standard 1 and standard 2. Add 300 microliters of the lysis buffer, avoiding contact of the pipette tip with an edge of the tube. Close the tubes. In this video, to demonstrate the techniques of working with the PrEP-NA extraction kit, a negative control sample from the kit of reagent is used as samples. Add 100 microliters of the sample into the marked tubes. Do not add samples to the negative control and standard tubes. Use new tip for each sample. 800 microliters of the standard 2 and standard 1 negative control into corresponding tubes. Close the tubes and vortex them maximally intensively for 3-5 seconds twice. Spin down the drops at 1000-3000 rpm for 3-5 seconds. Incubate the tubes for 15 minutes at 65 degrees Celsius. Spin down the drops at 13,000 rpm for 30 seconds at room temperature. Add 400 microliters of the precipitation buffer into all tubes. Use new tip for each sample. Close the tubes and vortex them maximally intensively for 3-5 seconds twice. Spin the tubes at 13,000 rpm for 15 minutes at room temperature. Remove the supernatant, avoiding contact of the pipette tip with the precipitate. Use new tip for each sample. Add 500 microliters of the washout solution 1 to the precipitate. Use new tip for each sample. Close the tubes and vortex them for 3-5 seconds. Invert the tube up and down, washing off the cap of the tube. It is necessary to carry out this procedure with each tube individually. Spin the tubes at 13,000 rpm for 5 minutes at room temperature. Remove the supernatant, avoiding contact of the pipette tip with the precipitate. Use new tip for each sample. Add 300 microliters of the washout solution 2 to the precipitate. Use new tip for each sample. And gently invert the tube up and down, washing off the walls and the cap of the tube. It is necessary to carry out this procedure with each tube individually. Spin the tubes at 13,000 rpm for 5 minutes at room temperature. Remove the supernatant, avoiding contact of the pipette tip with the precipitate. Use new tip for each sample. Open the tubes and dry the precipitate at 65 degrees Celsius for 5 minutes strictly. Add 16.5 microliters of dilution buffer to the precipitate. Each taking of dilution buffer from the tube must be performed by visually controlling the pipette tip dipping into the buffer during the process of dosing and adding the dilution buffer to dissolve the sample precipitate. Use new tip for each sample. Spin down the drops for 5 seconds. Incubate the tubes for 10 minutes at 65 degrees Celsius. Spin down the drops at 13,000 rpm for 30 seconds. Vortex them maximally intensively. Spin down the drops at 13,000 rpm for 5 seconds. The RNA preparation is ready. RNA should be used immediately for reverse transcription reaction. RNA sample shouldn't be stored.